So let's dive into a pretty wild idea. And honestly, it might be a little controversial. What if most of the history you're consuming every day is actually useless? I mean, think about it. It feels like history is absolutely everywhere right now. You've got these epic TV shows, huge blockbuster movies, and your social media feeds are just an endless scroll of viral history shorts. The past has never felt more present. And you know, this is a pretty new thing. It really wasn't that long ago that history was kind of seen as this dusty, old subject for academics. But now, everybody's talking about it. Everybody's watching it. But here's the catch. According to the historian Imra Safa Gurkhan, whose work really inspired this whole explainer, the vast majority of this popular history doesn't actually serve any real purpose. It's a huge claim, I know, so let's dig into what he's actually talking about. Okay, so what does he mean by useless? It's not that the facts are wrong or made up. No, the problem is how it's all presented to us, as these totally disconnected little nuggets of trivia. And there's actually a name for this. It's called Antiquarianism. And it's basically when history is treated like a game of Trivial Pursuit. It's just a big pile of fun facts and did-you-know anecdotes. You know the type, right? Here's a weird thing a Roman emperor did, or here's a crazy battle that happened. They're fun, for sure, but they don't actually explain anything. They don't help us understand why the world works the way it does. And this quote from Gherkin just hits the nail on the head. You know, scrolling through all those random bits of information might feel like you're learning something, but it's missing the analytical punch that makes history so incredibly valuable. At the end of the day, it's just entertainment. It's not real understanding. All right, so if just collecting fun facts is the wrong way to go about it, what's the right way? How do we actually turn history from this passive entertainment into a powerful, practical tool? Well, Gherkin says the answer is all about training two specific mental muscles. The thing is, he argues that our modern world, and especially social media, has kind of exposed this widespread weakness in a couple of key thinking skills. But the good news? Studying history is the perfect gym to build these muscles back up. And these two tools come from these two amazing Turkish concepts. The first one is muhakama, which is basically reasoning. This is all about your ability to take an argument apart, see how it's built, and spot its flaws and its strengths. The second one is mukayase, or comparison. And this one is so important. It's the skill of judging something from the past based on its own world, its own context, not by our modern standards. Okay, so this idea of comparison can sound a little abstract, right? So let's make it super concrete. Because if you judge people from the past by today's values, they just end up looking like monsters or idiots. But when you compare them to the people of their time, a totally different and much clearer picture starts to emerge. And wow, this slide just makes it so clear. In 1923, the brand new Republic of Turkey had only 1,241 high school students in the entire country. Now, if you compare that to today, it's just unbelievably small. But when you use mukayase, when you compare it to its contemporaries, like France, which had 50,000 university students, or the US, which was only a few years away from movies with sound, you suddenly get it. You understand the real context, the sheer scale of the challenges they were up against. Now that is useful history. So once we have these tools, this reasoning and this comparison, what can we actually do with them? Well, this is where it gets really cool. This is where history stops being just a bunch of old stories and becomes, well, it becomes a kind of laboratory for understanding the present. By looking at societies that were just completely different from ours, we get to see what's actually a fundamental part of being human versus what's just a weird habit of our specific time and place. It lets us question all the things we just assume are normal. Just take the idea of self-improvement. I mean, we are all completely obsessed with it, right? But check out this timeline. It's a shockingly new idea. Gherkin points out that 700 years ago, there wasn't even a word for it in Latin or Ottoman Turkish. The whole concept of constantly trying to optimize yourself is really deeply connected to the rise of capitalism. And seeing that, it helps you realize that one of our most fundamental cultural beliefs isn't some timeless truth. It's a product of history. And it's not just self-improvement, not by a long shot. Our modern ideas about childhood being this special, protected time, or marriage being about romantic love instead of an alliance, or even how we define something like a madness, all of these are brand new ideas, historically speaking. They would have seemed completely alien to people just a few centuries ago. And that really brings us to the whole point of this. The goal isn't to become some kind of walking encyclopedia of historical facts. The real reason to engage with the past is to learn how to think. It's about building perspective. This quote from Gherkin just perfectly captures the entire philosophy here. The job of a great historian, or really any great teacher, isn't to hand you a list of conclusions. It's to give you the tools, like reasoning and comparison, so that you can come to your own. So you might be asking, okay, that's great, but how do I actually do this? Well, here are 3 really simple, practical steps. First, just be a little skeptical of summaries and quick takes you hear, including this one. Second, whenever you can, try to get closer to the original source material. That's what historians do. And third, never settle for just one explanation. Always look for competing arguments to see the bigger picture. And that's really the magic here. When you start using tools like reasoning and comparison, history stops being this passive thing you consume. It becomes an active tool you can use to question the world around you and even question yourself. So I'll just leave you with this one question to chew on. What's one belief you hold, something that feels completely normal and universal, that might just be a temporary fad of our moment in history?